Welcome to Biohacking with Brittany, the podcast where we explore cutting-edge health strategies, uncover holistic wellness hacks, and dive deep into the science of living your best life. I'm your host, Brittany Ford, a registered holistic nutritionist and biohacking enthusiast, and I'm here to bring you expert insights and personal experiments and actionable tips really to optimize your health, mind, and body. And today is totally on par with that. Joining me, I have Molly Maloof, and she is one of the most well-known women in the biohacking space. She's a doctor and she specializes in love and intimacy, but connecting it to longevity and health span and lifespan. We talk a lot about her new method called the Adamo Method, which is basically this program that is really designed to help couples optimize their sexual and relational health. And we also kind of dive into her personal journey and what she's been through and how she got to this point today that has really helped shape her career and her views on longevity and health. I think it's a really interesting episode because we look at longevity from a relationship standpoint and how the relationships around us really impact our health on a much bigger level and a much deeper level and a bigger scale than we might have originally thought. So we talk about sex, we talk about intimacy in different ways, what we can do today to kind of optimize those areas, especially if you are, in a relationship where maybe you're in a rut, or maybe you just had a baby and things aren't what they were, like those types of challenges that a lot of couples can go through. We touch upon that and what you can kind of do in your relationship to kind of get out of that and bring back some of the spark. So we talk about the science of love and connection. It was pretty interesting. And I like Molly. We learned a lot and it was just fun to hang out and chat and, hang out with a fellow female biohacker in the space. So I appreciated her time and it was great to explore relationships together. And definitely let me know what you think about this episode. You can send me a message on Instagram at biohackingbrittany. That's where I am the most active, as you probably know, if you are a longtime listener. And before we get started, a shout out to Bioptimizers. Bioptimizers is one of my favorite supplement brands. I take not all, but many of their supplements. I love their magnesium and I love their digestive enzymes. And they just have a couple of really great products that are my staples. So their magnesium, I actually take one every single night. It has all 7 forms of magnesium in it. And this really helps me to sleep better, be more grounded and less stressed and anxious and everything like that. 75% of people are actually deficient in magnesium. And so I really do think magnesium can be so underrated as a supplement. I recommend everybody take it. If you are on the go all the time, if you are a new parent, if you drink a lot of alcohol or you eat a lot of processed foods, these are all things that can deplete magnesium levels in your body. So it's really important to replenish in a way that makes sense. And the supplement by Bioptimizers makes sense because it has all 7 forms of magnesium in it. So you can use my discount code biohackingbrittany. It will get you the most off possible. I will link it in my show notes at my website for you. I want you to save, I want you to save and be able to get the best healthy products, but at a great price. So that's why I have it available for you. And a shout out to Wellness. This is the holistic line of products from Katie Wells, who is known as the Wellness Mama. Love her and love everything that she stands for. And she has a line of toothpaste that is very, very clean. This is what I use. I'm currently using the charcoal one and my husband uses the cinnamon one. Doesn't have any fluoride in it, doesn't have any crappy preservatives or additives or anything like that, or coloring or, flavoring, all sorts of things that they're adding to toothpaste these days. Very clean product and actually works. I also have 2 of the strawberry flavored ones for my kid when he is old enough, which he has no teeth right now, but for one day in the future. And it is one of the cleanest products I've seen. So if you're looking for things like toothpaste, deodorant, shampoo, hair care, things like that, wellness is the place to go. And that is spelled WELLNESSE. So definitely check that out. And if you use my link, I think it saves you 12% off of all products, which is pretty great. In my show notes, and it's on my website, and it's everywhere for you. You can also message me and I will send it directly to you. Enjoy this episode with Molly. It was wonderful. And you can catch me next week for another episode. I put out episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Please subscribe and leave a review. And thank you for listening. Welcome back to Biohacking with Brittany. I am so thrilled that you are listening today. I have the pleasure of having Dr. Molly Maloof on the show today. I feel like she has been a guest who I have wanted on the show for so long, and we run in very similar circles in the biohacking female health area. And she is a trailblazer in healthspan extension and author of The Spark Factor, which is actually the first biohacking book for women. She's also the founder and CEO of Adamo Bioscience and the creator of the Adamo Method. I hope I'm saying that correctly. But this is a revolutionary program designed to help couples optimize their sexual and relational health, which we are going to dive into today. So, Dr. Molly, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I am excited you're here. So I'm so curious how you got to the point of focusing on sexual health in your career. Can you kind of like take us back a little bit and like, how did you get to this point?
So first off, my career is still very focused on like extending health span. So when I was trying to understand the breadth of what health span was about, first I started with metabolic health, and now we're seeing this huge metabolic health like movement happening, right? So that was me like a decade ago. I was like, everyone should wear blood sugar monitors. This was 2014. Nobody believed me at the time. And I was like watching, I've always had the ability to see into the future of what's coming. And that's why companies have paid me actually I've been paid by like 50 different companies or given equity at companies specifically for my capacity to advise and to provide foresight. I've worked with market research companies. They call me to figure out what trends are coming next. And so I'm very lucky that I've just been kind of gifted with this capacity. But the problem with that is that you're often way too early for a lot of things before they're ready for prime time. So I would say that like the big focus of my life, I've basically sat when I first left my residency and got my medical license and was trying to figure out my life. It was January 2013. And I was like, I basically holed myself up in my loft for like 3 months. And I was like, I am going to figure out my life plan. And in that was where my vision of like, I want to radically extend human health span. I want to play a role in making this happen for humanity. And it's really funny because very recently, this doctor who runs this very large longevity physician group, he sat next to me at a dinner at a conference. And he goes, Molly, it's just really an honor to sit next to you because like you've influenced me and like a lot of doctors in our careers. And I was like, what? And I was like, really? And I was like, he's like, yeah, you were one of the first people to be doing personalized medicine, like health span extension. And I was like, whoa, like, and so it's funny because you start your career feeling like a crazy person, I was like, I'm not going to do mainstream medicine. I'm going to leave my residency. I'm going to start my own practice. I'm going to get my license. I'm going to figure out how to do things the way that I think is the way you would heal people. And it was definitively, challenging the mainstream narrative. And so working in the space of sexuality and people are like, why are you working in sex and relationships? And it's like, and also like just for everyone's like knowledge, it's not like I'm not actually claiming to be an expert in sex and relationships. I just personally accidentally healed my own sexual dysfunction with psychedelic medicine and found a lot of my spirituality has really emerged from embracing my sexuality and not like putting it into this box where it has to hide. Because I was raised super Christian and I'm still Christian and I still pray to Jesus. I'm also Jewish and I've also studied Buddhism. So like I definitely believe in Christianity and I believe there's some value to some of the things that they teach about sexuality. But one of the things that always struck me was how a lot of like ancient Taoism and Buddhism treated sexuality as this like very important part of human life, like this life-giving part of human existence, this thing that actually can build relationships and make them stronger. And like Kama Sutra was actually designed for couples to actually build their relationships so that they could build their stature in society. Like it was actually kind of it was a means of building a better material existence. And then there was this thing called Karma Mudra that came along. And Karma Mudra was about using sexuality to actually enhance your spiritual existence. So, and I mean, in Taoism, it was like sexuality is a means of enhancing your energy and actually creating a more balanced and harmonious existence. So we have somehow in Western culture, like lost these really important teachings from these ancient Eastern cultures. And we haven't really reinvented our version of sexuality. And so what we've been left with is a very superficial, very sadly, like if you really just look at it, like it's really based on appearance. It's really based on performance. It's based on what we learn in beauty magazines like Cosmopolitan and watching Pornhub. So like, that's not what sex really is about. Like, it's not about just finding a mate and reproducing, even though there is, if you actually look at the neurobiology of love, which is something that I started studying when I was teaching at Stanford, I was like, oh my God, how is it that relationships are like the biggest factor in longevity and happiness? And I didn't get taught this in medical school. Like, why is this not more of a bigger conversation? Why is this relegated to psychology when you can't like actually disentangle psychology from biology? Like they are intertwined completely. And our psychology is essentially our software programming and our biology is our hardware, but they are influencing each other like all the time. So when I started recognizing like the primary parental relationships that we have are fundamentally going to inform all of our relationships as adults, and the bad habits we saw our parents behave or become our bad habits in our relationships. Our traumas from our families become the traumas that we reenact in our future relationships. Our religious upbringings influence our beliefs around sex and our capacity to actually fully embody ourselves in the sexual act. And I was like, whoa. So sex is just one piece, right? The neurobiology of love is the sex drive, the romantic love drive, the drive to attach. And the sex drive is what basically drives people to have multiple partners. And then there's the romantic love drive, which turns on when you have had sex with one person consistently and you're releasing oxytocin, you're releasing norepinephrine, you're releasing dopamine, you're releasing serotonin, and you're creating this neurochemical bond to a person that's designed to literally be a commitment device. It's a physiological addiction designed by God to be a commitment device to actually encourage you to bond with a person, to develop oxytocin, like oxytocin bonds. So like, this is really funny. If you actually want to like study men and women, and we are different, men are vasopressin dominant, women are oxytocin dominant. So if you really want to bond with a man, do something that requires a little bit of danger. If you really want to bond with a woman, do something that requires a lot of intimacy and connection and communication. And it's funny because like these bonds are actually, these social bonds are fundamentally behind child rearing, behind childbirth, behind nursing, behind parent bonds, behind parent-child bonds, behind community bonds, behind orgasm. I mean, it's like, so oxytocin is like this really important hormone. And why would we evolve something so important? Well, it's thought that we beat out other hominids because of this adaptation of oxytocin neurobiology, because that bonding reaction in the body creates strength in numbers. It creates communities. It creates tribes. Tribes are far more likely to survive than individuals. And this is the funny thing about America is like we have lost the tribal mentality and we've become a hyper individualistic, egocentric culture. But that is creating a lot of mental illness because people are isolated. They are alone. They are disconnected. They are not speaking to their families. They don't have enough friends. Some people don't even have a very large percentage of the population doesn't have any friends. And people are consuming processed social connection through social media, processed sex through porn, and processed love through drugs. And it's like these are not the solution to people's needs. What people are really seeking is human connection. And there's a reason for that, because loneliness is a primitive hunger signal designed to bring you closer to your tribe. And that would protect you in terms of, and when it comes to danger, and like neighboring tribes or like wild animals. Like if the more information and resources you share with your tribe, the safer you are. And this is actually where I think purpose evolved, because basically everything in nature has a purpose, and humans are meant to have a purpose in societies. And so if you see, there's actually a lot of people suffering, not having a job, not having a reason for being, not having families. And so part of what I've kind of been sort of studying in this whole grand vision of what healthspan extension is about is these three pillars. One is metabolic health. You need energy to survive. You need to, like, survival is a core function of biology. You need to connect. You need to connect your energy. It needs to be connected around you to a tribe, to nature, to God. And then you have to direct your energy to something purposeful. And so if you have these three things, you will be flourishing. If you do not have one of these things, you can still function and generally do well, but you're not going to get full flourishing unless you have great energy, unless you have great connections, unless you have great purpose.
Toothpaste. We all need it and use it daily. But have you ever read the ingredients of your toothpaste or noticed the FDA poison warning on there? If not, keep on listening for some surprising information that your dentist might not be sharing with you. Fluoride has long been a common ingredient in many commercial toothpastes, hailed for its ability to prevent cavities. However, recent studies have raised concerns about the potential health risks associated with fluoride exposure. These risks include thyroid dysfunction, dental fluorosis, skeletal fluorosis, and potential neurotoxicity. Given these concerns, Wellness offers a safer alternative that doesn't compromise our health, yet remains effective. Why choose Wellness toothpaste? It is founded by Wellness Mama Katie Wells, and Wellness is dedicated to natural health and uses hydroxyapatite instead of fluoride, a game changer in oral care. Here's why it is a better choice. It's fluoride free, eliminating all the health risks that I just talked about. The natural hydroxyapatite formula strengthens enamel and whitens your teeth. Plus, it's crafted from natural ingredients, gentle on gums, and eco-friendly. I love it. I use it all the time. I love the taste of it, and I don't think I will switch to anything else. So make the switch for yourself today to Wellness toothpaste. Visit wellness.com and use code biohackingbrittany for 12% off your order. That's Wellness spelled WELLNESSE.com. Safeguard your health with Wellness because your smile deserves the best. Yeah. Wow. I agree and align with so much of what you said. I also grew up super Christian and know what it's like to have your sexuality kind of like compressed and put into a box, especially as a woman. And I have two brothers, and even just seeing the different way that they were treated versus how I was treated growing up is very sad and very sexist. And I think a lot of women deal with that in different ways. And what you said about, the oxytocin being released, I have a new baby, and the breastfeeding oxytocin is unreal.
Oh my God, tell me more.
I can't even describe it. Like I understood that this was going to happen before having a baby. Like I understood there would be this like oxytocin release. It's going to feel good for him, feel good for me. But what happens is like when people want to give him a bottle instead of me breastfeeding, then I'm like, no, I want it. Like, it's almost like an addiction. I'm like, no, but I need that feel good hormone. Like I'm craving it right now. He needs to feed. I want that.
And he's craving it too.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Because there's this bidirectional relationship between the baby and the mother. And that when the baby's looking you in the eye, when they're breastfeeding you, they're bonding to you. They're learning from you. They're like literally so people don't realize this, but your gastrointestinal tract is a sense organ that is literally taking in information through what's being fed, and it's processing that information, and then it's determining where this energy goes and what it's going to be doing. So your body is literally feeding and forming this child and like literally designing the baby. I mean, what you eat, it becomes what the baby is. And it's just like this thing that we're so disconnected from. And, so many moms turn to, formula so quickly. And it's like, I get it. I get why they do it because it's really inconvenient, but it's also been kind of pressed upon our culture as women that like, you need to just go back to work. And like one of my friends just had a baby in Philippines, and she had a 40-day rest period where she just chilled and her body bounced back like that. And I just wonder if we took the stress off of women after birth and just let them be, and like taught women how to do yoga and weight training during pregnancy. Like this woman, she's a friend of mine, and she's just an inspiration because she really was like, I'm going to be a super fit mom. I'm going to have a painless birth, and I'm going to have this like beautiful child, and I'm going to do this traditionally. And she kind of followed more of a traditional path of childbirth and child rearing. And I just feel like we have this like, it's funny because like all these kids, like the biggest change in teenagers that teachers are noticing from like my generation to their generation, like this Gen Z, is instead of it being boredom as a baseline, like mental status, it's anxiety. And I just wonder how much of that anxiety is society and cell phones, and how much of that is actually the mother being forced to be in an anxious state for the first few years of a child's life while she's trying to work multiple jobs and actually take care of a child. Like, I really don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And honestly, it's no shame to any moms who have to work, because
it's no shame, but it's just like we've made this culture. We could, as a government, we could hyper incentivize women to have children by literally, in my opinion, the government should pay women what it costs to have a baby. If you really like, it's like $180K to have a child. Like that's the yearly, like that's what being a mother actually is equatable to, is in terms of payment for a job. That's what they say. So I'm not saying we should necessarily tell all the women in the country to just get paid extra, but look, the government can spend billions of dollars in Iran and all these wars, and we're literally running out of people. Why aren't we just funding women to have children and making it super easy for families to be created? And I'm not talking $12,000 a year. I'm talking like give women $100K a year, and you'll be seeing a lot of women have kids.
Yeah. The mat leave equivalent that you get is garbage.
It's absurd.
It's absurd. Yeah. It's really not.
Now, these Scandinavian countries that do it differently have a very different health culture. Like if you look at Singapore, if you look at Germany, if you look at Scandinavian countries, like countries that are frankly wealthy, they have very, like, it's really funny. Like a lot of these countries are still struggling to get women to have kids. And so part of the reason why I was so interested in sex was like, well, clearly this is like the biological imperative, right? Like we're supposed to have sex because we're supposed to have kids. And I feel like as a woman now almost 41, and I'm about to go do ovarian stem cells, ovarian exosomes, and ovarian PRP in the Bahamas, I'm like, fuck me. Like, sorry to say that out loud, but I bought into the feminist belief system that like you can have it all. And the truth is you can't. You can't have it all at once. You can have it all over at different times of your life. But I look at like how youthful my mom looks at 65. And it's like she had babies when she was 20, 21, 22, like through her 20s and 30s. Like I think, and so like I just feel like we as women have been told like build a career, put it off. And it's like, look, I'm one of those women. Like I did that. But looking back, it's like, is this really the right move for our culture? Like we probably should just be incentivizing women to have kids young and then like letting them, because you have more energy when you're young. But, I've also built my energy capacity over the last decade. So I'm way more resilient than the average 41-year-old, but I know it's real. Like I have one of my therapists had a baby at 47, and she's like, Molly, navigating perimenopause and having a child, not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. I think it was Michelle Obama who said like women can have it all, but not at the same time. And I totally agree with that. Like just balancing a career and a family and figuring out when to do it. And it's not like our biology has caught up with us where, we're as fertile at 40, 45 as we are at 25. Like It's going to take forever for that to ever catch up. So yeah, it's hard to kind of navigate that path, but obviously, thankfully, there's biohacking that can kind of help keep us as healthy as we can be, but still, yeah, it's a lot. It really is a lot.
I mean, first and foremost, like I think there's like this important thing that women have to recognize, especially if you have a partner. And there's nothing against women who don't have partners, have kids, but the reality is like you have only so much energy in your body to commit to the tasks at hand. You've got your work, you've got your relationship, and you've got your children. And I was raised with in a family where my parents' relationship was primary, and then the relationship with us was secondary. And I think that that's probably based in a lot of the Christian faith, but I think it's a really important thing to let women out there know that like you do need to prioritize your primary relationship, because if you don't, you might lose it.
What does that look like? Sorry, when you're growing up with that, like, I'm just like so curious what that looked like, that you saw like the relationship was first.
So when my dad worked and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And so when we were at school, my mom was preparing, dinner and getting ready for, basically keeping the household. My mom's an incredible homemaker. Like, her homes are impeccably clean, have the best, the best beds, the best, my parents' beds for some reason are better than hotel beds. Like, I don't know how my mom does it. She's got this layering process of like making, you get into these beds and you're like, why does this feel so good? And so she really, really prided herself on homemaking. And it wasn't like, and I'm not saying that women who are homemakers today aren't doing this, but she looked at it as a profession. Like, she looked at it as her job. So she wasn't sitting around watching TV. She was like keeping up the house and making things beautiful, and then she would also cook an amazing meal every night for dinner, most nights. And my dad also cooked. And we also all learned to cook. So that was like a big piece of our family culture. But basically my mom, every time I would come home from school, she'd have snacks made for all of us. And my girlfriends would all come hang out because they knew that we had the best food. And then my mom would have this amazing meal ready for my dad. And she wasn't a good cook when she first started out. She was a terrible cook, and she had to learn how to become a good cook. So my dad and my mom, when my dad got home, he would sit in the living room with my mom alone, and they would just have a glass of wine and talk for like an hour. And that like uninterrupted time was sacred to them, and we never bothered them. And then we would have this like family meal together and maybe watch TV as my mom was finishing things up. And then we would all help contribute to doing the dishes. But we had a very, very regimented household. You got up early in the morning. My dad took us to school. We made our breakfasts. We packed our lunches. My mom was like, there was really no capacity to be late for school. Like, we didn't even know what tardiness was, because we all had perfect attendance. Because even if you were sick, you still went to school.
Yeah, my mom was like that. Yeah.
I don't know what it is about. Where are you from? Which state are you from?
I live in Canada.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah. Well, we're from the Midwest. And so the Midwest, I feel like Canada and the Midwest are kind of similar-ish, not really, more like mountain states. But point is if you grew up in a house like that, my parents always aligned when it came to discipline. There was never mom against dad. It was they were aligned. And then they took vacations alone. They would always have, once we are old enough, my parents, we all, once you have 5 kids, they start taking care of each other. And then they would have somebody who would come and supervise. But generally speaking, we kind of learned how to take care of ourselves. And I do think that the time they spent alone, doing their own things, going out on their own dates, going to parties with their friends, there was something about watching them be a couple throughout the entire relationship and still remain that kind of couple, still date each other, still go on trips together, still celebrate anniversaries. It's an example, unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people see. And so I think part of the reason why I waited so long why I have waited so long and not chosen to get married yet is because I don't think I would have stayed married if I would have chosen any of the guys that I had options to marry. I don't want to be divorced. So I don't know what's going on with men in this culture, but I have to just say this out loud that the quality of women that I meet in the world, and I travel all over the world. I travel to Europe, I travel all over America. The quality and caliber of women in this country is far exceeds the quality and caliber of men. And I don't know what happened to men. And I don't know if it was feminism and the rise of women working, but something has happened to the male species in this country where they just don't carry the same level of standards that I think my parents' generation carried, and responsibility and, masculinity. And I'm not trying to dog on men. It's just, I think they're having their own crisis. I think we're not really recognizing how much men are really suffering right now, and how many men are lost and don't know how to be a provider, and are putting off having kids because they don't feel like they can afford them either. And, it's like a really interesting time to be alive as a human because there's so much change happening. So, I mean, I guess going back to like what I believe is I personally believe that like sex is not just a duty thing that you do for your husband. It's not. And like 65% of women have an orgasm every time they have sex. This is heterosexual women versus like 95% of heterosexual men. So there's a huge pleasure gap. And I think I think this pleasure gap is a big reason why a lot of women, once they start having kids, their libidos just tank. Because if you get like women and desire is based on conditioning. So a woman who's having consistently great sex and consistent orgasms with a man is going to want it more because her body is going to associate sex is pleasurable. A woman who is consistently having aversive experiences sexually, which by the way, usually starts when 1 in 4 women are abused as children, 1 in 5 are raped in college, and 1 in 5 are raped in her lifetime, and 1 in 3 are assaulted in their lifetime. And so we're not talking about how many women have developed aversive experiences to sex because of having aversive experiences with sex. So part of the reason why I started Adamo was because I was like, we've got to figure out how to help women heal and develop a better relationship to sex, because relationship problems, mood disorders, and trauma are the biggest psychosomatic causes of sexual dysfunction that I think can be remedied. And I developed a program that was based on psychedelic assisted sex therapy. Now, personally, I've had to pause on the psychedelic development because it's been policy has just not caught up with culture. And there's a lot of companies making a ton of money on products in California and in Canada, but it's all gray area right now. And so even though I did develop like some phenomenal medicines for sexual dysfunction, the chances of them seeing the light of day anytime soon, unfortunately, are pretty dim right now. It's like not possible in this culture. So anyway, I also in the process was like, well, before we go develop this drug assisted therapy model, which was all designed to be based on digital health and home use of medicine with a partner, there's basically 3 different ways to create sexual improvement with psychedelics. One is high dose therapist-led MDMA assisted therapy. That I used MDMA with a partner in my before I became a doctor, and accidentally healed sexual dysfunction. And I had no idea why it worked until MAPS came around. And I realized that MDMA can reformat painful memories as non-aversive. And it creates such a neuroplastic state that it moves PTSD inducing memories from the present into the past. Really cool. Love that. But the thing is like MDMA is illegal, and MAPS had a really big scandal because one of the therapists had a romantic relationship with one of the women who had PTSD who was in the study. And I actually presented at Oxford University about psychedelics as love drugs, because one of the things that also paused me in my development of these medicines, because I was working in the entactogen space, I paused because I was like, oh my God, even with perfect use, there's always going to be that risk that people are going to abuse this, and that people are going to get bonded to the wrong person, that people are going to lie on their intake. Because we actually had to turn away in our first clinical study for our sex therapy. Because here's the thing, we developed some medicines, but we also developed a digital health platform, which is launched. It's called Adamo, and it's a digital health program that's a online course that you take that has somatic practices. You take it with a partner, and you actually work on your psychology and your somatic sexuality with a partner, and you actually learn how to have better, more pleasurable sex.
Do you have trouble recalling names, dates, or where you left things? I definitely do as a new mom. I kid you not, I am forgetting things all of the time. I feel like I'm juggling so much in my brain, and it's really hard to keep clear-minded when you are taking care of a newborn. If you're struggling and you're finding it difficult to focus during the day, or you notice yourself zoning out when people are talking to you, your cognitive health and your brain could really use some love. Bioptimizers has created a one-of-a-kind product called Mushroom Breakthrough that can supercharge your brain power. It's packed with highly concentrated mushroom extracts that science shows enhance memory, focus, processing speed, and more. Just one serving contains 5 potent superfoods, collagen, and 1.2 pounds of 4 concentrated mushrooms: lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps, and chaga. This cutting edge blend is a powerful way to rebuild your brain and rewire it for maximum energy, focus, and performance in less than 30 days. After each serving of Mushroom Breakthrough, your ability to memorize and recall information will improve. This is actually I notice such a difference with this. I'm serious. Every time I take this, I notice a difference. And you'll get a heavy dose of antioxidants for immune support. The way that I do this is I drink it daily. I add 2 scoops to a large glass of nut milk, and I drink this in the afternoon. It's my afternoon pick-me-up that is not a stimulant. And as a new mom, as a parent, I literally rely on this. This is like my mommy's milk, mommy's mushroom milk that I rely on to get through my day and really help my brain perform much better, kind of like how it used to before having a baby. So don't miss out on the brain boosting power of this amazing product. For an exclusive offer, you can go to bioptimizers.com/biohackingbrittany and use code biohackingbrittany at checkout. This will get you the most amount off. So if you even compared to Amazon or anywhere else that you see these products, my discount code will get you the most off. So make sure you use it. Again, that's biohackingbrittany and use the code at checkout. And the great thing about Bioptimizers is that you can try it risk-free with their 365-day money-back guarantee. Try it now to sharpen your edge and reach your full potential.
So we ran a study on the sex therapy that worked. It works as well as a drug. We compared it to existing drugs and we're like, wow, this actually works as well as a drug would work. But my belief is that there was a few couples in our program. Well, first of all, we had inclusion and exclusion criteria. We had to actually exclude quite a large number of couples that were physically abusive. I had no idea how common physical abuse was in relationships, but there's a big, and we have a big problem of domestic abuse, and it's bidirectional. Sometimes women do abuse men, but oftentimes when women do fight men, it's reactive abuse, which is a man has driven them to this place of losing their mind and breaking. And women can be broken. If you really wear someone down long enough, they're going to throw a pan at you. So anyway, but that doesn't excuse it. I really don't believe there's any role of violence ever in relationships, period. End of story. However, I had to come to terms with the reality that the space of working in sex and love is a minefield. Cause these are you're basically working with these core human drives. And that's when I started to realize that the psychedelic space doesn't really fully understand the capacity to not only just heal people, but also really hurt people. And so that's part of the reason why we paused on the drug development. But there were certain couples in the program, as I was going to say earlier, that I really do feel would have had a breakthrough if they had had access to an entactogen to break them open, because there's a certain number of people that will get stuck in certain spots in the program. And unless you have a way to have a breakthrough and to break open this, get out of your ego and get into your body and get into the mindset of the other person sitting in front of you. That was the real vision of this company. It was you would take this low dose medicine, you would create, because we actually had high dose medicines we were working on that were entactogens. And then we also worked on aphrodisiacs. So we worked on, because psychedelics for relationships can not only be for healing trauma and opening up psycholytic doses for opening up conversation, but aphrodisiac doses are non-hallucinogenic doses that give you enough of a body high and a relaxation where you're more open to experiencing human connection in a physical form. And so when I started working on those, I was like, oh my God, these are so awesome. But then I had to stop that too, because I started getting, started getting threats from people. People were basically I realized that people saw me. I was basically a target, and I had to pause on that too, because even if you're making breakthroughs, if someone doesn't like you, if you have any enemies, they will use it against you. And I realized that there are some really bad actors in the world. And I had to really pause on working on this mission that I was on, because I started having risks to my other careers, because I'm a public figure and I'm also a medical doctor. So I kind of just like put everything on the shelf and just started launching the sex therapy because I was like, well, at least couples can do something without medicine. And then eventually when the medicine can become legalized, we can pursue it. But I have a lot of friends that are married and they do psychedelics with their partner quarterly. And I'm not advocating that people do this because I can't because I'm a doctor, but I can say that anecdotally, I have seen couples become stronger and healthier and more bonded because once the romantic love feeling wears off at about 6 years or so, 3 to 6 years, that's when you start it's really like 7 to 10 years when people start getting the real challenges in the relationship, right? They're like, oh my God, like I can't stand this person. And you forget the feeling of what it felt like to love that person so deeply. You forget that romantic love feeling. And so I basically figured out how to reproduce that on like a molecular level. And I was like, I mean, that's a pretty powerful tool, right? Like, and the unfortunate thing is I realized that if I was a spy working for the CIA, I could like legitimately, like, I was like, wow, like if I were like a Bond girl, I could literally slip this in a guy's drink and make them madly in love with me and do whatever I told them to do. And that's when I realized like, this is like, even though I figured out how to do this is safe. Like this isn't really safe for prime time. Like the world, this could really hurt people. This could really mess up human relationships. And so I'm glad that I did the work that I did because it's really taught me about the complexities of human love, but it's also taught me that like, there's going to be a future where people are going to look at psychedelics like other medicines and they're going to see them as very powerful tools that you do not want to abuse. And there's unfortunately a lot of abuse, like specifically in the ketamine space, there's just a lot of excess. And there's a lot of just like habitual daily sublingual intranasal ketamine use being prescribed by doctors. And I used to actually prescribe ketamine clinically for ketamine assisted therapy during the pandemic. And I really learned a lot about how it can really help people. It can really truly get people out of a real bad depression and PTSD. But once the pandemic was over and I realized people were just drug seeking, I just stopped because I was like, I can't be a part of this anymore. So it's what I'm trying to get to, if the audience really wants to understand like my personal perspective on psychedelics is that I still believe in them, but I believe that they are way better. You're way better off not using them on a regular basis. And unfortunately in LA, Miami, Austin, San Francisco, New York, they're being used on a regular basis by a lot of people. And they're not innocuous. They have risks and very serious risks that I know multiple people that have died because of psychedelics. So specifically ketamine, which is far more dangerous than people give it credit for. So it's funny because like I started this company in 2021. I was just coming out of the pandemic and I was like, wow, I want to build a company around the science of love. And it opened up an entire deep understanding of both the light side of love and the dark side of love. And, you know, the thing that I think is so fascinating is that we think about love as this like beautiful facet of human life, but like any aspect of human life, there is light and there is dark. And there's a really great TED talk on like dangerous, like, I know what I'm trying to think. It's called Unhealthy Love. And it's about how there's the healthy love, which is like you have a partner, you get bonded, you have a family, you feel safe, nurtured, and protected. And you are like more likely to survive. You're more likely to live a long and healthy, happy life because you have a healthy relationship. That's like my parents. They're rarity these days. The reality is that I also learned about the unhealthy side of love, which is that there's a lot of people that, I mean, I experienced stalking. I experienced in a relationship that someone tried to extort me. I've experienced people becoming obsessed with me that I don't even know, especially being in social media. I've had to block a lot of people that are like nonstop sending me weird texts. And you know, it's like love is and like women don't fully recognize it when we go out and date. We're like risking our life every time we go and date. Like there are so many, I've learned so many sad things from women have opened up to me about so many terrible things that have happened to them. And I believe that what's driving a lot of this terrible behavior when it comes to sexual trauma is unfortunately the hardwiring of human existence to survive and reproduce. And it's like not always pretty because rape is actually an evolutionary adaptation for a low status male to be able to find a way to create life with a higher status female. And it's gross, you know, it's like super gross. So like like studying love with this like very optimistic, I'm going to change the world. It's going to be great. Made me realize, oh my God, human life I live in nature right now. Like I'm overlooking the Tetons. There's literally animals everywhere. And I think one of the things, my sister Nikki is this like incredible oil painter, and she paints domestic life, but she also lives in Massachusetts in the middle of kind of nowhere. And so she gets to see a lot of animals, and she sees a lot of nature outside of her window. And just like her, I live in nature in Wyoming, and I see all sorts of animals. I see elk, I see sheep, I see eagles and mountain lions and bears. And I mean, it's like a menagerie out here. But the thing that we forget as human is that we are just as much nature as nature. And we believe that we are separate from nature, but human nature is still nature. And if you look at nature, there's a really good Instagram called Nature is Metal. And it's like, nature is vicious. And like my sister Nikki is this world famous artist, and she's got a new show in Paris at Gallery Perrotin, which is a blue chip art like gallery. She's like world class. I think one of the reasons why she has succeeded in her career is because she's been able to capture the terror of the reality of human existence. Like there's so much, like she has these beautiful paintings of life, and there's something deeply menacing about every painting that you have to go find. And it's like, life is beautiful for some people, but for a lot of people, it's really hard. And there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of anxiety. And that's what she captures. And I think if you look at nature, you're like, that's actually what you will learn the most. Like I learned the most from health by examining the world from the lens of evolution. And it's like organismal biology has actually informed more of my beliefs on health than medical school. Like medical school taught me about fixing disease. It did not teach me about health. I had to create a course in medical school on health because I realized it was missing from the curriculum. And then I created another course on healthspan at Stanford because I was like because they asked me to. They were like, we think you know something about longevity and healthspan. You should come teach. And so part of my career has always been asking these really deep, fundamental, existential questions about existence. Like, what is this life? Why are we here? What is it about? How do we measure it? How do we measure health? How do we improve it? And that led me to this belief of life as energy and information and structure. So if you want to understand life, you have to understand the physical structure of the body, the information that we share and transmit and that we absorb, and the energy that we produce and that we gather from our environment. And it's just like, when you strip life down to this most simple equation, it's like, that's when you can really start to like build a framework. And that's where my framework around human flourishing really emerged.
Yeah. Wow. So many things
stuff
I want to dive into, but we don't have too much time.
I can go over if we need to go longer.
No. And yeah, I mean, I'd love that. I think it's so interesting when you talk about psychedelics. I've dabbled in psychedelics. I've microdosed with psilocybin many, many times. I do agree with you that it has its time and place. Like I went through a healing journey with it for about 6 months of using it, and then felt like I didn't really need it anymore and just kind of like left that part. I would love to start using it again when I stop breastfeeding. You know, I wanted to take it during pregnancy, but I didn't.
I actually have a friend who did, by the way, wildly. And she had a really significant autoimmune disease, moved to the jungle, and basically weaned herself off of all medications and had natural births, which she credits entirely to using mushrooms throughout her entire pregnancy. And I was like, whoa. Wow. I mean, she's such an inspiration. Like that's so rare, but I mean, nature is healing, you know?
Yeah. I actually know a few people who use psilocybin to help with postpartum depression. And it's not something they publicly talk about, but like
there's a lot of people studying this. Actually, there's an organization this eventually will probably end up being, there's basically one of the biggest spaces that you want to watch is non-hallucinogenic psychedelic medicines that are going to be coming from companies like AbbVie. They've invested in Gilgamesh. They're building non-hallucinogenic antidepressants. And it's like, I used to be really critical of this whole like non-hallucinogenic space, but actually based on what I've seen with a lot of people, like I've seen like people become psychotic and never come back. or they come back and they're consistently and having to take antipsychotic medicines to stay sane. I do think that not everybody is going to be able to and not everyone should take high dose psychedelics. And until we can figure out who's predisposed for a psychotic break, and until you know for a fact that you do not have a predisposition through your family history, and I'm talking trace it back multiple generations, because just just having a little predisposition with like, oh, my great uncle had schizophrenia. You do not want to go into these spaces unless you are like super certain that you are not going to have like a bad experience. Because as much as even if psychedelics could help 95% of people, but 5% of people ended up with a bad experience, and that bad experience was like life altering, we are going to have to ask ourselves, is it really worth it? You know, like 5% of people. I mean, I don't know if those were the numbers, but there's certainly a good solid percentage of people that will never be normal again. And I think that should scare. I genuinely think that people should be a little bit more afraid of the effects of these. And because they aren't perfectly safe. They just aren't. They're a lot safer than street drugs like cocaine and heroin and Oxycontin and like a lot of prescription drugs, but they're still drugs.
And it's not talked about enough about like the side effects or like the negative aspects that can come from it.
Or bonding to people that you maybe shouldn't end up having sex with and maybe making children with.
That's definitely not part of the narrative. Yeah. I have a lot of female listeners and a lot of moms who listen, new moms, older moms, whatever. What would you say to those women listening who potentially don't have the sexual relationship with their partner that they once did after they've had kids? What piece of advice can you kind of leave us with that says like, here's something empowering that you can start doing today?
Well, first of all, let's talk a little bit about what the heck is the Adamo Method and why did I create this? So I learned this method. This was a combination. I hired these two sex therapists, Sayeda Desolé and Aaron Michael. And they're actually, neither of them are licensed sex therapists, which is quite interesting. They've been working on independently as sex coaches, but I would say that they're more well-versed and more aware than the average licensed sex therapist. Like they're very much innovators. And so Sayeda's work was based on psychosexual like development. So like, how do you understand your psychology around your sexuality? And then Aaron's work was based on somatic sexuality. So basically, a lot of women have numb pelvic floors, and a lot of women have damage from pregnancy to the pelvic floor. So the first thing I would say to any woman who's had children is see a pelvic floor therapist, because you might actually, like I interviewed this one pelvic floor therapist, and she said, look, Molly, I love your method, but I'm pretty sure I can solve most of these problems with just a few weeks of therapy with me. And I'm like, look, like I'm all for people first and foremost identifying the biological causes of sexual dysfunction. So if you have pelvic floor dysfunction, if you have not had a pelvic floor exam, if you do not know if you actually have areas of numbness, areas of pain, you need to figure that out first. And so pelvic floor mapping is a part of is definitely a part of our program. We have this thing called erotic mapping. So, but you can also do this in a pelvic floor clinic. And so I'm really all about like multidisciplinary care for women. So first and foremost, let's figure out, is something wrong with your thyroid? Is there something wrong with your estrogen, progesterone? A lot of women are having children later. But even if you had children naturally, like one of my friends had super screwed up hormones after a normal birth, and she was in her 30s, and her hormones were completely dysfunctional. So I think a lot of postpartum depression is postpartum depletion. Is like a woman maybe didn't know how to feed herself properly during pregnancy. Maybe she's deficient in some neurotransmitters. Maybe she's got methylation issues. Maybe she's just, if you don't properly nourish your body, like pregnancy is going to cause real problems, because your baby's going to pull out all of your nutrients and you're going to be left with nothing. And you'll be left with something, but you're not going to be left with the same amount of nutrients. So like, this is where omega-3s are paramount. This is where iron is paramount. This is where B vitamins are paramount. This is where protein is paramount. And maintaining a healthy blood sugar is paramount during pregnancy. Like pregnancy and postpartum, you have to replete. You have to replete. You have to measure too. So like that's one side, the biological side, right? And then there's the psychological side. Like maybe your relationship with your partner has suffered because you're not prioritizing it. And so, maybe you're just feeling disconnected emotionally from this individual because you're just not prioritizing each other. And maybe you guys need like couples therapy, or maybe you need an actual sex therapist. So like, we're not replacing a sex therapist. We are augmenting sex therapy with a course on psychosexuality and somatic, basically sexual mechanics. So what we have found that most sex therapists are not taught about sexual mechanics. They're taught about sex from a psychological perspective, but they're not really taught about it from a practical standpoint of how do you have good sex. Where do you learn? People watch porn, and what we see in porn is not actually what's good sex for women. Porn is largely sex from a male gaze, and men love domination. Men love conquest, right? And that's what you see in a lot of sex. But I know what it looks like, because like I'm a multi-orgasmic woman, so I know what orgasms look like, and it does not look like what women are doing in porn at all. It's totally faked. I mean, the vast majority of what I see in porn is just faking orgasms for women. And so I'm not really like, I think, frankly, I think most people listening to this, if you're really struggling with your relationship, taking our course and really working on like learning how to have more pleasurable sex. So what we teach is first getting to know your own sexuality. Like, what turns you on? What are your desires? What are your fears? What are the things that you need to really encounter before you can fully open yourself to your partner? And honestly, dropping shame and dropping a lot of these blocks that you have is like the first step to actually being embodied. We have a lot of embodiment practices that help you get inside your body. And like, I was hyper dissociated for about a decade of my life because of sexual trauma in my 20s. So I know what it's like to not be embodied. I know what it's like to have a body that's honestly armored physically, and you're basically tense all the time. So it took me real trauma therapy to get that out. You know, I actually had to do a lot of trauma release exercises and real somatic therapy to get my body into a relaxed state. So we're not replacing mainstream sex, like trauma therapy for a woman who has unresolved sexual trauma, but we have a trauma informed therapy. So if you do have sexual trauma, this is going to be enabling you to like not be in danger by getting, it was hyper informed by trauma. So if a woman is listening and is afraid to actually explore her sexuality, know that there's a lot of safe places that you can go in the program, including we have like a chill room, and the chill room is like a lot of somatic practices that you do to just move the energy through your body if you get triggered. Then we teach suction versus friction in terms of sex. So when someone's having friction-based sex, it's what you mostly see in porn. It's just the in and out movement of the penis. It's like in and out the whole time. I rarely see the kind of porn that I'm trying. I actually like at some point need to actually hire one of my friends. She has a healthy porn company, and I should probably eventually hire her to make a version of this to show people what this looks like. But basically, suction versus friction is you learn to bring your partner into you. You learn to push out your pelvic floor and then to pull your partner in. So you're like literally sucking your partner into your body. And then you're maintaining that suction. And so instead of it being in and out, where you feel most of the sensation here at the introitus, you actually are moving your hips up and down, and they're moving their hips up and down. And so you're actually in contact. So there's more sensation. And if you learn to breathe with your pelvic floor, because your pelvic floor has a diaphragm, just like your lungs have a diaphragm, your pelvic floor has a diaphragm. And when you breathe in and you push out your pelvic floor, you're directing energy and blood flow to your pelvis. And that is creating more sensation, more lubrication, and more pleasure. So we're literally teaching, I mean, we saw orgasm frequency and orgasm duration go up dramatically. We saw lubrication go up, arousal go up. We saw sexual confidence improve. We saw sexual shame go down. We saw sexual satisfaction rates skyrocket. And we saw sexual communication improve between partners. But the thing that I really love about our study that we did was that we saw romantic love improve by over 13% in people that were in committed long-term relationships. And to me, that's like a really big deal, because we saw passion improve, we saw intimacy improve, and we studied committed couples. So we didn't really see a major change in attachment and commitment, because that was what we already chose as a baseline and inclusion criteria. But to actually see measurable improvements in love, it was like, yeah, I mean, of course, I mean, if you work on your intimacy for 9 weeks, you're going to see an improvement in your sex life and your love life. And it was just really fun. And I think like someday you'll be able to do the method and go to a beautiful hotel in the Caribbean and overlook the ocean and have a peak experience with your partner with medicine attached.
Sign me up.
It's going to take a little time for us to get to that point.
Yeah. I love that. And you make me want to definitely try the method in general, because I just think it's fascinating. And I always think there's like space to grow your relationship and get better and get healthier. And to do it in a hotel with some psychedelics would also be lovely as well. So I will stay tuned for that. If people want to connect with you via like Instagram, social media, or your website, where can they do that and how can they find you?
At Molly Maloof. Let's see here. X is at Molly Maloof, MD. LinkedIn at Molly Maloof, MD. Twitter, that's X. Instagram at drmolly.co or at Living Adamo, ADAMO. And then our website is www.livingadamo.com. And then my personal website is drmolly.co. And for health coaches out there, for health practitioners who want to learn more about the broad vision I have of healthspan, I have a course called Your Healthspan Journey. And it might stand for course that I converted into an online course. And it's like over 18 hours of content. So it's a lot. It's like a full call. Like it's really grad student level education on healthspan. And it's based on theory and practice. So if you're interested in that, you can also check that out too.
Sweet. I will put all of that in the show notes and on my website so everyone can find you easily. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I feel like I definitely have to come and have you back because I have so much more I want to ask you. But this is awesome. And I think everyone definitely got a lot out of it.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Biohacking with Brittany. If you're interested in finding the show notes or the sponsors for this episode, you can do so on my website, which is biohackingbrittany.com. Remember to follow me on Instagram where I'm most active. My handle is at biohackingbrittany. And if you're interested in working together and you want to email me directly, you can do that. My email is info@biohackingbrittany.com. And I look forward to hearing from you and having you tune in next week.